I'm sitting here with Matt Walker, a neuroscientist from UC Berkeley, expert on sleep. Matt, first of all, I want to ask you, why sleep? I mean, there's so many things as a scientist that you could have focused on. Why sleep?
I think for a number of reasons. I think first, when you think about sleep, it's 1/3 of our lives. But we as individuals who experience sleep, we don't really know very much about this thing called our sleep because we're not conscious. So firstly, I just find that fascinating that 1/3 of our life could go into an activity, a biological activity, where the organism themselves, they have no understanding of it, no comprehension, no experience of it, apart from dreaming perhaps, but still. I think the second thing is that, even 20 years ago, if you were to ask a scientist like me, why do we sleep? The best that we could do was to say, you sleep to cure sleepiness. Mm-hmm. Well, that's like saying, okay, why do we eat? Well, you eat to cure hunger. Mm-hmm. No, you eat for so many biological and physiological reasons. But that's the best that we had back then. And that's when I started studying sleep. And I just thought it was, to me, in at least human brain science, it was the most fascinating question, but the least well answered question. And for me, as someone who I'm much more interested in questions than I am answers.
Okay.
And so here, it seemed to be one of the hardest scientific questions that we faced. We still had no understanding. And I just thought, I want to see if I can try and contribute a little bit to that field.
Now, I used to think that I could sleep 4 hours and function perfectly the next day. Work, 4 hours of sleep, work. Well, work out in the morning, then work. What toll does not sleeping have in our bodies?
So downstairs in the body, sleep is essential for every one of your major physiological systems. In fact, there is no tissue of your body, there is no major organ of your body that isn't wonderfully enhanced by sleep when we get it, or significantly impaired when we don't get enough. So what would be those examples? First, sleep is essential for your cardiovascular system. And in fact, deep sleep provides one of the very best forms of, it's almost like blood pressure management. It's a perfect blood pressure treatment, and it's all natural. Mm-hmm. So when we go into deep sleep, our heart rate decreases, our blood pressure starts to decrease, our vessels relax, and it's almost like a reboot for your cardiovascular system. The second thing that sleep powerfully regulates is your body's ability to control your blood sugar. And there is an epidemic of type 2 diabetes right now. And when we deprive you of sleep, even just for 1 or 2 hours, we can see marked changes in your body's ability to take in food and then keep your blood sugar down. Mm-hmm. So that's the second thing. The third thing I would say is your immune system. And here sleep matters enormously. And what we've discovered is that it's during sleep at night when the body almost gets restocked in terms of all of its weapons in its immune arsenal. And it's not just that you restock all of the weapons in your immune system, it's that your body is sensitized to those immune factors. So the next day you wake up and you've got more of these immune response factors, and your body is much more receptive and ready to be sensitive to those immune signals. And so you wake up that much more robust as an individual. And then I could tell you about your hormonal, your reproductive hormonal health. I could tell you about your thermoregulation. We sometimes forget that our ability to control our body temperature is essential. A good example here is a neonate who has been born prematurely. One of our biggest concerns is that they can't regulate their own body temperature, and it's life critical. So these are just a few of the many examples we can give for downstairs in the body, why that mentality that you mentioned that, you know, I can survive on 4 hours of sleep. I'm one of those individuals. Or that mentality of I'll sleep when I'm dead. But if you adopt that mindset, what we know is that you will be dead sooner and the quality of your life will be significantly worse as a consequence.
And what is the cause of insomnia, the main cause for insomnia? People, I mean, I have people, close people that suffer so much from insomnia, and it's terrible. There's no easy solution, I find.
I think it's a huge problem. And one of the reasons that insomnia is such a difficult problem to treat is that it's a disorder of the body, and we can see that your nervous system, and particularly your fight or flight branch of the nervous system, that becomes overactive in people who have insomnia. Also, levels of a stress hormone called cortisol are far too high right at the moment when otherwise you want to be falling asleep. Just at that time, all of us, our cortisol levels drop right down. And in insomnia patients, they start to drop down, but then right before bed, they go back up again. And then there's another spike in the middle of the night, which I think relates to this idea of insomnia where, look, I can't fall asleep or I can't stay asleep. So yes, insomnia is a condition that we can measure within the body, but it's really a condition of your mind. And the main principal cause of insomnia is stress and anxiety. Stress and anxiety are so difficult to treat. You know, mental health, if you look at things like cancer or cardiovascular disease and all of the treatments that we've developed in the last 50 years, for multiple different forms of cancer and cardiovascular disease, we've been able to treat those and bend the arrow of the risk down. But when you look at mental health, even though we've poured in huge amounts of money to research all around the world, mental health issues have either stayed the same or they're worse. And when you are stressed and you're anxious or you're depressed, sleep will not arrive. And therefore, to treat the mind has been so difficult. And because insomnia is a condition of the mind, it's been a challenge. But we do have some more effective ways now.
What can somebody that has insomnia do? I mean, they can take a pill, they can take supplements. What have you studied and what have you found that is effective and what have you found that is totally ineffective?
Yeah, so you can just kind of do a web search, a Google search for sleep hygiene. And sleep hygiene, it's a set of tips. So we all know that we have to have dental hygiene. We have to brush our teeth. There's something called sleep hygiene. And there are maybe 5 or 6 typical sleep hygiene tips for optimizing your sleep. And they help people who don't have insomnia. But reading those and trying to do them as a patient with insomnia typically doesn't work very well. So what do? The first thing that we have to try to do is manage the mind. We've got to do something about your stress. So we can use things like meditation, or you can do a journal where early in the evening you just write down all of your concerns and all of your stress and worry. Do something like a wind down routine. We have routines for our children. You know, they take a bath and then we dim the lights down and we read them a story, and we have a whole routine to gradually bring them down. But for us as adults, we just think we're racing, and then we switch off the light and sleep should happen.
Yeah, not so.
Sleep is not like a light switch. It's like landing a plane. You just have to take time. So find a wind down routine for patients with insomnia that relaxes them. And then meditation or doing breath work. There's lots of different ways to try to treat that sort of anxiousness. However, some of those things can still be a challenge. Probably one of the most effective tools that we have, and it sounds very strange when an insomnia patient comes to my sleep center and they say, look, I'm not getting enough sleep. My response is, we're going to do something called sleep restriction therapy. And they say, hang on, I just told you I don't get enough sleep, and you're telling me the therapy is sleep restriction therapy. It's not really sleep restriction therapy, it's bedtime therapy.
Okay, I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, so what happens with insomnia patients is that they spend too much time in bed, and they are awake for a lot of that time. So gradually what we say is, okay, you want to get maybe 7.5 hours, but right now you're telling me you just get 5 hours a night at best, but you're spending maybe 2.5 hours awake. So now I say to you, okay, if your natural bedtime was from, let's say, midnight to 8 a.m. in the morning, now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to tell you, still wake up at 8 a.m., that's fine, but I want you to go to bed at 2 a.m. And I'm going to restrict your time in bed to just 6 hours. And it's hard, and you have to be motivated. But what happens is that the first night, you go to bed and your sleep is still bad. And you wake up the next morning and you think, this is terrible. I didn't.
Not a good idea.
I didn't sleep bad, and I had already 2 hours less time in bed. And then the next night, it gets a little bit better. But then after 3 or 4 nights, your brain starts to realize, wow, I don't have this luxury of being in bed for 8 hours anymore. I only have 6 hours. So your brain gets much more efficient.
You're training it.
And you're training it. You're building up a sleep appetite, hunger. It's almost like you're depriving the brain of sleep calories, and it gets very, very hungry. And now all of a sudden, when you're going to bed at 2 a.m., the next thing you remember is your alarm going off at 8 a.m. And for the first time, you've slept a full night of sleep, 6 hours. But remember, I told you, this patient, they were saying to me, I only get 5 hours of sleep, but I'm in bed for 8 hours. Well, I now have you in bed for just 6 hours, but you're sleeping almost all of that time. So you're in bed for less, but you're sleeping more. And then gradually I'll say, good, your system has relearned how to sleep, and you've regained your confidence that my bed is where I sleep always. And then I can say, let's go to 1:30 a.m. Let's give you an extra half hour in bed. And then we track you with a little diary, and you're still doing well. And then we go to 1 a.m. and it's all looking good. And then we go to 12.
You got 1 hour more.
And then 1 hour more. But you're now sleeping almost 7 hours.
Yeah.
And then we go to 12:30 p.m. and all of a sudden your sleep starts to get bad again. We go right back, and we go back to 1:30 a.m. And we just keep playing with that. And at first it's very difficult to adhere to it. You have to be very, very motivated. But it is one of the most effective things that we have to solve insomnia.
Now, if you are in bed, you go to bed at whatever time, 10, 11 p.m., and then at 3 a.m. you wake up. So you didn't have problems going to bed, but at 2, 3 a.m. you wake up and your mind starts spinning, and I have to do this and that.
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you have to stay there? Do you take melatonin? What do you do?
Right. So there are several things. When people ask me this question, they say, I don't quite understand it, but every night, almost right on the minute, at 3 a.m., I wake up. And it happens to me 3 or 4 times a week. My first question to them is, how do you know that it's 3 a.m.? And their answer is, well, because I look at the clock. That's your first mistake.
Okay.
Remove all clock faces from the bedroom. Because firstly, it only makes you more anxious to know what time it is. The second reason is because knowing that it's 3 a.m. is of no use to you. It doesn't help you at all to know that it's 3 a.m. So it's fine to have an alarm clock or use your phone for an alarm, but make sure that you cannot see it and resist the urge. The second thing to do then at that point is, if you have woken up and your mind starts spinning, use the same techniques that we mentioned for stress and anxiety. So meditation or just breathing. What you have to do is stop your mind from thinking about all of your worries. And when you start to meditate and you start to sort of focus on your breathing or focus on how your body is feeling, or you just focus on, I inhale and then I exhale, and you really try to sense, where is the breath coming in? Is it through my nose? Is it through my mouth? And where do I feel that inhale? Do I feel it in my nose, at the back of my throat? Do I feel it in my chest? Do I feel it in my stomach? And all of a sudden, you're focusing on your body and you've stopped focusing on your mind. And then the next thing that happens is that your alarm goes off because you stopped overthinking the process of sleep. However, if you are still trying to do that and it's been 25 minutes or more, the advice is don't worry, just get out of bed. Don't spend a lot of time awake in bed.
Tossing and turning.
Tossing and turning, because it only makes you more anxious, and you start to learn the connection that my bed is where I'm always awake, and that's a bad association to make. So just get up in dim light, go to a different room, and just read a book, listen to a podcast, don't check email, don't eat, or do stretching, or do a meditation. And only when you feel, almost to the point where you can sense your head is starting to, that's the time to go back to bed, when you are really, really sleepy.
Now, menopause for women causes insomnia.
Yeah.
Is there some way for women to have a better quality of sleep in this stage?
It's very difficult, and it's, there are a number of reasons for that. Firstly, reproductive hormones, things like estrogen and prolactin, those things help regulate your sleep, it turns out. And so when those start to become compromised in this perimenopausal period, that's where sleep problems begin. But that's not the main reason why sleep is problematic. The main reason is something that we call vasomotor symptoms, which is just a fancy way of saying that I have problems with regulating my body temperature. And what happens is that you get too much vasodilation, that your vessels start to open up much more. And so you start to get very hot very quickly.
Hot flashes.
Hot flashes. And when you ask women, okay, what is the principal reason that your menopausal symptoms are keeping you awake at night? They say, it's my temperature. I just cannot regulate my temperature. I'm cold, and then I wake up and I've got too much perspiration on me, and then because I'm too hot, and then you can't regulate temperature. So the principal suggestion right now, if you look at the data, is hormone replacement therapy, what we call bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. Now, there have been some concerns in the medical literature about hormone replacement therapy for women being associated with a higher risk of breast cancer. If you actually look at the data, and I have a very good friend who's also in the health space, a guy called Dr. Peter Attia, and he is incredible. He has done many podcasts about this, and you can just Google Peter Attia and hormone replacement therapy, or HRT. And he will correct any belief that you have that there is this artificial risk. But what we find coming back to sleep is that when you start to rebalance the hormonal profile of a woman, those symptoms start to decrease, and sleep starts to increase, insomnia symptoms start to decrease. So I would say that's one way to do it. If you are fortunate enough to have the ability to afford these things, and they're not cheap, but there are certain smart mattresses that are out there right now that you can use that will try to cool the body down. And I don't know of any data yet. I only know of one of the companies. I have no association with them, but they were telling me that they have had so many women going through this menopausal period writing to them and saying, this has really helped me because you can help regulate my body temperature. So that may be an option, but I don't know of any scientific data that validates that claim yet.
I was going to ask you about putting a mattress cover, if that could help regulate, but then I don't know how, because you set a temperature, that's what I understand, in those mattresses. So
some of them you set the temperature, but others are actually pre-programmed to try to sort of
cool down and then
when we
warm
measure
up.
the body and we actually look at naturally what happens to your body, the temperature signature of your body, your surface warms up just as you're about to get into bed, and you bring all of the blood to the surface of the skin, and you release heat from the surface, so the core of your body temperature drops. So we need to warm you up to cool you down at the core. We need to warm the surface up to therefore release heat to cool your core, warm you up to cool you down to fall asleep. And then we need to keep you cool to stay asleep. And then we need to warm you up to wake you up. And so some of these smart mattresses, they understand this. They've looked at the data, and you can see this temperature signature profile that the mattress will try to move the body through. So some you set it and that's it. Others, you can say, I want it cold, or I want colder or warmer, colder or warmer, and it's different for men and women. But nevertheless, however you set it, it will still walk you through this gradient. It's just that for some people, it starts higher.
Yeah, the numbers are going to be different.
Yeah, the profile will be different, but it still stays that profile.
Matt, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you for the
Matthew
privilege.
Walker and Why We Sleep.
Thank you.